sewer transportation will have to adopt their fats, oil, and grease program. They call it FOG program. Like we said earlier, I think it's going to be a fairly simple process. We've already visited 14 of the restaurants, 11 of them are already in compliance. There's a few that weren't, that we couldn't get into it, so we couldn't check, but we'll continue to follow up on that. Like we said earlier, we'll have to check them twice a year, make sure they're working properly and they have their cleaning logs on site. Other than that, that's about it. Anybody has any questions about the program? No?
Well, I would say that you inspected how many restaurants?
14.
That are already in compliance?
11.
11 out of 14.
And the 3 that were out, you just weren't able to get into.
We couldn't get in, one does not have one. The rest we could not get in. I think Woody's was closed. I have to look on my other list.
That's right. 11 out of 14 is pretty good, already ready to go.
Yeah. They were like DJ said, they already have to do it for DHEC anyway. So it's just an extension of what they have to do now.
How does the one not have one? If that's already in.
It's the pizza place right now.
That was sliced.
I'm not sure.
They're not required to have one?
I'm not sure if they do or not. I have to look into that because they don't have a fryer.
I see.
All they do is cook pizza. I'll have to look into that, and I can't get it. I'm sure Woody's has to have one, and what's the other one we went to? The washout. We couldn't get it there, they were still closed.
I promise you have.
Yeah.
They're gonna be huge.
So you still have that in process, and
Yes,
that
ma'am.
will be concluded?
So I think it'd be a simple process to put the whole program together.
Okay.
Up next is,
It should say Andrew Gilreath.
well, Andrew, you might as well come on up here too. I mean, you know, this is big enough for both of you. So you guys get prepared, don't have a heart attack. I had a stroke.
Yeah.
Does anybody need copies of the second drawing that went out? I think we do need a couple copies. I don't, does one of y'all have a copy of that?
We can make a copy of that and
Is this a good one? I don't remember if that's the right one or not. I didn't think so.
probably get the reference.
I saw the other
That's
one.
not it.
Here it is.
We make a copy of it?
It don't make no difference.
It'll be easy to read.
So you want to go ahead and start describing it while Wes makes copies? What?
Where'd that one go? It shows the parking.
So how we got here tonight is, we've had an item on the strategic plan for a few years to build a storage facility at the Clem Farm, where we currently have an array of odds and ends, city equipment, city vehicles. And when we talked about it at the strategic planning session, there was kind of a general consensus that if we're gonna build something there, we should maybe look towards the future and create a second floor that, you know, kind of a shell of a second floor for an undetermined future use in case we ever need extra city facilities, be it more storage, offices, a remote command center, a new public works to get out of the water plant. Lots of options for the future, but just basically get us to a point where we could store all of our equipment and have an upstairs that was finished enough that we could come back in the later and fit it out to a future purpose. So we met with the architect a few times and worked through a few concepts. And by the time we designed the building to hold all the things we have now and have an upstairs, the architect came back with a price estimate in the mid $3 millions. And that just stopped it. I
Mid
said,
what?
stop.
3
3
million.
million.
3 million?
And so I said, stop, before we go any further, let's take this back to city council and make sure they understand kind of the commitment we're doing. And the bid had furniture and fittings, and so you
I mean,
could.
that's a really
Yeah.
1000% finished.
Yeah,
space like
that's
this,
top of the line,
finish that.
but even stripping it back, we're looking at $2 million or so, and that's today. And so we just wanna make sure that everyone understood what we were going for, and we were going down the right path, and that we are willing to commit. I mean, it's not gonna be a $200,000 metal shed, it's gonna be a full building, designed and engineered, et cetera. So before we went any further and spend any more money on this concept, we wanted you guys to have a chance to review it and make sure we're on the right track.
And we did, you all might remember, we had the architect here briefly. And one of the taskings we got from council was to make sure that it was in keeping with the neighborhood, so it didn't bring down their property value. So this is anticipating exterior facade that blends in. It's not just a metal building that looks like an industrial site. So that does drive the cost up as well.
And at 2 million or whatever, it's basically a shell inside, but
At the two, what we got, for the white, what we call a white box, is more or less a shell.
so to
Was it
upfit it to where
2.3?
you want to be, I guess initially, how much more would that be?
I mean, we're happy with it.
Oh,
You know,
at 2
we're on the
million,
inside.
you'd be fine with it?
We just want to get the space laid out correctly the first time, and then we can evolve and finish it, over time. We'd like to get the layout, and all the code required stuff has to go in. That never gets cheaper, it just keeps going up.
So is there a timeline and you seeing it in maybe different phases, or?
Well, the second story would definitely be something that would be a phased project. And then again, kind of what Aaron talked about is, for the longest time, we've talked about it making more sense to obviously stage it to where it's future looking versus always being reactive. So, this would include the second floor, it just wouldn't be a finish until that was needed, right?
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that we came to grips with was, initially we talked about it, well, if you had to move your emergency center for a hurricane from here somewhere, moving it there doesn't do you any good. That's a wash. The only thing you use that second floor for is storage, or you're gonna create offices there. And it's $2 or $3 million, the best use of our money, with some other things that's getting ready to come down the pipe that we can talk about, opportunities maybe. That's why when they come to me and said, this is a $3 million project, I said, nah, we're not spending $3 million like this without really hashing it out.
And you can see if you look, I hope it's clear on yours, but the penciled in stuff are the initial ideas we had as far as how to use the space most effectively. We have not engaged the architect to go any further at this point. We have enough money in this year's budget to continue with the wetlands study and permitting that won't hurt us, but we don't have to do anything, or we can continue on.
So you're looking at about close to 4,000 square feet upstairs,
Yeah, the total on the building was just like 7,000,
but that includes downstairs and upstairs, so 36
about right.
and some change. Okay.
About right.
Upstairs and same downstairs, okay. Nothing gets cheaper, and we're already strapped for space. I'm excited about it. We've got the money, and I like the fact that you pared it down from 3.5 to 2, to get something coming out of the ground. But, we're strapped for space, and we've talked about this. I think it's time for us to, make some plans and move some dirt.
Would this amount of space give you room for the next X years? I mean, you wouldn't have to come back and add to this footprint?
I don't see how we would, not in our time.
Okay, that's my question.
This gives us some well-needed maintenance space too, so they're not trying to do all their maintenance work out in the parking lot.
Do you want us to, are we gonna look at this later, or do you want us to like kind of shake our heads? Whether we like it or not, or what, I mean, what are we supposed to do with this guy?
Because first, it's just acknowledging at the potential price, are we good to proceed to find the concept?
Gotcha.
and we can schedule, if we're good proceeding, we can clean this up even further and bring it back to you guys, because we do feel like there's some things that will at least more awareness, if not a vote.
I think $3 million can be better spent elsewhere at this time,
All right.
personally. I think this project has gotten way over where we intended it at all. I mean, it's good to look towards the future, but it's a little too far. And then Tim's right, that we can spend that money better in other places at the current time.
Is there a short-term need currently? I mean, or do you foresee this as a need basis?
I mean, the bottom floor would be used immediately. The top floor was the kind of the future look. I mean, it would be, to help with some storage instead of being at the water plant.
Okay.
But
There is a need currently for storage underneath.
I mean, it's been in the strategic plan for years. I'm not arguing the amount or better spending of funds. It's just, and to DJ's point, as we took what has been talked about in the last, 5 at least, strategic plans that I can think of, at least discussed, whether it made the list or not. It's always been in there. And it's always been utilize the space that's there, provide for storage needs, provide for future expansion should we need it, whether it's adding something like STR or whatever the case may be. And so that's where we're at. This isn't like a giant wish list. We're just meeting the criteria that was with it.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
I don't have a problem doing certain things simultaneously, so I think that this is a great start, but also if others have suggestions about where other money could be spent, so why couldn't we sort of do both of those things at the same time? If we feel $3 million could be spent, or I just don't know what would be in that list other than this.
I don't know if any, DJ's point's valid, like, how does it compare to other projects? But I'd like to know what those other projects are instead of, there might be some other projects or there's some projects we're looking at but we haven't talked about. If there are other projects that we're looking at that we haven't talked about, we need to talk about them to see where it ranks in the priority of things.
And as soon as we can talk about them, we will. But right now, one of those projects is held up, not by us, but by the other side of the world.
Yeah, I think to Aaron's point, and really to help Eric and I out is, it really just comes down to, do you want us as your staff to spend any more time on this? Or do you want us to do something else? And I think that's what we need, because otherwise we're not gonna spend more time.
And one thing we could do is, when Lee gets back, at the upcoming work session, we could, because he's got that slideshow from the strategic planning session this year that kind of laid out the master dream list of all future things that ended up to be 30 or $40 million worth of things. So we could look back at that list and slot this in there and let you guys say, okay, Arctic Avenue, buy Long Island, redo Center Street, build out pedestrian paths, all the dream list that we presented back in the spring. And say, okay, how does this shake out on the dream list? Is it worth moving forward with?
I think that's a great plan.
And again, the scale back version was 2.3
Based on the architect, yeah.
They don't really know, we're guessing.
I just,
And the architect, I guarantee, is trying to protect himself, so the number two then.
Yeah, we just need full information. I mean, it's hard to compare this to secret projects.
There ain't no
They're
secret.
not secret projects, they're other stuff that's been in the strategic plan for years as well, like pedestrian paths and things that you've talked about.
And like buying Long Island, Jenna spent, I don't know how many untold hours. I was at a meeting Saturday morning at 8:30 about buying Long Island. So, that's, it's stuff that's in the works, but you just can't do, say,
So I think
we'll do
it's-
it tomorrow.
I think it's fair and
But you're saying
reasonable.
there's projects you're working on that have not yet been shared with everybody, so it's hard to prioritize this with something that's,
We will make sure that you know exactly.
I'm just
Well,
saying.
I think it's fair and
I
reasonable.
thought everybody knew we were trying to buy Long Island. I mean, go ahead,
No,
sorry.
thank you. I think the plan, we've all worked on strategic plans. I think that's a great way, and then we'll just put everything out and prioritize and give feedback. So I think that's great.
All right,
Okay.
so we will pause work on this for future.
Till next month.
And then the last thing for the work session is just scheduling the next franchise talk. what happened this month is we couldn't have it this month because we had some other things on executive session and work session that kind of bumped it. So I'd like to start with a proposal, just to ask you guys your availability at next month's work session. If we have, quote, regular business that comes up, if we could push the work session back to 5 o'clock and start on franchises and deal with that. And then if we have no regular business, we could start franchises at 5:45 or 6. I mean, would everyone be available as early as 5 o'clock for the work session
The
next
8th.
month?
Yes.
That's fine, I just had a question about what's gonna happen in between. And I'm just saying this because I wasn't particularly clear, were the two franchise owners going to meet with staff to help sort of cull the list and give feedback, and then
So-
it comes to us?
So what's gonna happen in between is you guys and the franchise holders will get a report from the last meeting saying, this is what we discussed. These are two or three options to handle each one of these issues, you know. Just as an example, ATVs on the beach. Option 1, the ordinance says no ATVs. Option 2, the kind of consensus was ATVs could operate with certain hours. These are the hours. So we'll provide them to you guys to consider, so we can talk about them, and also to the franchisees to give feedback. There are other non-beach chair and umbrella franchise related questions
Right.
that we need to get to also. So we also need to start working down that list.
So do we see that those a separate phase, so we're going to deal with umbrellas and chairs?
We're gonna deal with umbrellas and chairs, and the ones that apply to all of them that also affect umbrellas and chairs, we'll need to deal with those at the same time.
Yeah.
Same time.
Would
One
they be
ordinance
invited to
change.
participate
Oh, yeah.
in the work
yes, sir.
session?
And I've already put them,
Okay.
I've already given them all notice that this is coming up. It's just the dates are TBD.
Okay, date's fine. It works for me.
So if we have no city council business that comes up for the work session, we'll start at the regular time. If we get a lot of ordinance stuff, we'll bump it back to 5 o'clock, so we have lots of time to discuss franchises. All right, thanks, thank you.
So you got 4 minutes.